You think you know what an angel looks like? White robes, feathered wings, gentle face, maybe a halo, maybe a harp. Something soft, something comforting, something that shows up in greeting cards and hospital room paintings and the tops of Christmas trees. Here is what the Bible actually says an angel looks like. 4 faces, a human face, a lion's face, an ox's face, an eagle's face simultaneously, on one being, 4 wings. Straight legs ending in the hooves of a calf, gleaming like polished bronze. Human hands under the wings. The sound of their movement like the sound of a great army, like the voice of the Almighty, like the tumult of a camp. That's Ezekiel. Isaiah describes 6-winged creatures around the throne of God, covering their faces with 2 wings because the direct sight of God is too much even for them, covering their feet with 2 wings, flying with 2 wings, crying to each other in voices so loud that the doorposts of the temple shake and the whole building fills with smoke. John in Revelation sees a creature covered in eyes, eyes on its body, eyes on its wings, eyes everywhere, ceaselessly watching, never sleeping, never stopping their cry of holy, holy, holy. These are not the gentle attendants of greeting card theology. These are the terrifying, multi-faced, fire-adjacent beings that guard the throne of God, and the first thing every single one of them says when they appear to a human being is the same thing. Do not be afraid. They say it because the appropriate human response to seeing one of them is to collapse. The entire soft, comforting image of the angel that dominates popular culture is a medieval and Renaissance artistic decision, a choice to make the messengers of God approachable, to domesticate them for human comfort. The actual biblical angel is something else entirely. Today we go through the complete hierarchy, 9 orders, 3 tiers, every named angel, every function, every description the actual texts give us, not the greeting cards, not the movies, not the art, the real thing. And by the end, the question you will not be able to avoid is this: if these beings are real, if the texts that describe them are taken seriously, then the universe is populated by intelligences so far beyond human comprehension that our entire framework for what a person is needs to be completely revised. And if they are not real, if they are entirely symbolic, entirely metaphorical, entirely the product of ancient human imagination, then human imagination, at its most unconstrained, produces something so alien and so vast that the distinction between real and imagined starts to feel less stable than you thought. Either way, let's meet them. What an angel actually is before we get to the hierarchy. The word angel comes from the Greek angelos, messenger, which comes from the Hebrew malak, same meaning, messenger. This is where most popular introductions to angels stop. Angels are God's messengers, and then they move on. But the messenger function is only one of several things angels do in Scripture, and in the developed theological tradition, it is not even the primary thing. The messenger role is what angels do when they interact with humans. What they do the rest of the time is something else entirely. What they are: Christian theology drawing on the Bible, on Jewish tradition that preceded it, and on Greek philosophical categories absorbed during the Hellenistic period, understands angels as pure spiritual beings, no bodies, no physical form in the ordinary sense. When they appear with wings and faces in the prophetic visions, most theologians interpret this as symbolic, a way of expressing, in visual terms, qualities that are not actually visual. The wings express swiftness. The eyes express omnidirectionality of attention. The multiple faces express the comprehensive nature of divine service. Intelligent beings, not automatons. They have will, they have understanding, they have, and this is theologically significant, the capacity to choose. This capacity is what makes the fall of Lucifer possible. A being without genuine freedom cannot genuinely rebel. The angels that fell freely. Immaterial, but not infinite. Angels are created beings. They have limits. They are not omniscient, not omnipotent, not omnipresent. They are vast, but they are not God. Personal beings. They have names, at least some of them do. They have distinct functions, distinct characters, distinct relationships with the divine and with humans. The question of hierarchy. The hierarchical ordering of angels' 9 orders arranged in 3 tiers is not directly stated anywhere in the Bible. It is the work of a 5th-century Christian theologian who wrote under the pseudonym Dionysius the Areopagite, probably a Syrian monk writing around 500 CE, whose real identity remains unknown. His 2 key works, the Celestial Hierarchy and the Ecclesiastical Hierarchy, synthesized biblical references to angelic beings with Neoplatonic philosophy and produced the most complete systematic angelology in Christian history. For roughly 1,000 years, the medieval church believed these texts were written by Dionysius, the Athenian judge converted by Paul in Acts 17. This gave them near apostolic authority. Thomas Aquinas cited them extensively. Dante built his paradise around their structure. The hierarchy is not scripture, but it is one of the most influential theological documents in Western history, and it gave Christian thought its most complete map of the angelic world. Here is that map, the first sphere beings of pure contemplation. The first sphere, the highest tier, closest to God, contains 3 orders of angels whose primary function is not interaction with the created world. They exist in the direct presence of God. They contemplate, they minister, they burn. The Seraphim, the highest order, named in only one passage of the entire Bible, Isaiah 6, but that passage is one of the most vivid in all of Scripture. Isaiah is in the temple when he receives his vision of God on the throne, high and lifted up, the hem of his robe filling the temple. Above the throne, the Seraphim, 6 wings, 2 covering the face, 2 covering the feet, 2 for flight. And they call to each other antiphonally, back and forth in what is the oldest recorded liturgy in any tradition. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. The doors shake, the temple fills with smoke. The word seraph in Hebrew means burning one. The seraphim are fire, not angels that carry fire or are associated with fire beings whose nature is fire. The closest thing in the created order to the consuming nature of God himself. One of them flies to Isaiah with a burning coal taken from the altar. It touches his lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for. The burning purifies. In Pseudo-Dionysius's hierarchy, the seraphim are the beings most consumed by love for God. Their burning is not destructive, it is the expression of a love so intense it manifests as literal fire. They are as close to pure divine love as a created being can be. Thomas Aquinas spent considerable effort arguing that seraphim cannot possibly feel cold. This sounds like a joke. It was serious theology. The cherubim, second order, and the first major collision between the biblical reality and the popular image. When most people hear cherub, they picture a chubby Renaissance baby with tiny wings, the putti of Italian painting, used so extensively in decorative art that the word cherub became synonymous with cute winged infant. The biblical cherubim could not be more different. Ezekiel's vision, chapters 1 and 10, describes them in detail that is deliberately overwhelming. 4 faces each, human, lion, ox, eagle, 4 wings, straight legs with calves' hooves, the gleam of burnished bronze. Beside each cherub, a wheel, each wheel intersecting another wheel at right angles, the rims of the wheels covered in eyes. When the cherubim moved, the wheels moved. When the cherubim rose, the wheels rose. The spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. This is not a baby with wings. This is something that defies stable visualization, a being so structurally unlike a human that every attempt to draw it produces something that looks like a mistake. The cherubim in Scripture are guardians. After the expulsion from Eden, God places cherubim at the east gate of the garden, along with a flaming sword that turns every direction to guard the way to the tree of life. The Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred object in Hebrew religion, the portable throne of God, the object whose presence in the temple meant God was present, was flanked by 2 golden cherubim whose wings stretched over the mercy seat. God sat enthroned above the cherubim, not because the cherubim were decorative, because the cherubim were the guardians of the divine presence itself. They appear in the temple curtains, woven into the fabric. They appear in Solomon's temple, carved into every wall and door. They are the visual language of holiness. Everywhere the divine is most concentrated, the cherubim are present. The thrones, 3rd order of the first sphere, the least described of the 3, which is itself telling the higher the order, the harder human language finds it to describe what they are. Pseudo-Dionysius describes the thrones as the divine dwelling, the beings in whom God rests, through whom divine judgment flows into the created order. They are associated with justice, with the stability and permanence of divine decisions. In Colossians 1, Paul lists thrones among the angelic orders created through and for Christ, one of the few direct New Testament references to the hierarchical ordering. The thrones do not act, they are acted through. They are the channel between the divine will and its execution, the beings who carry God's decisions from the realm of pure contemplation into the realm where decisions become events. The 2nd sphere beings of governance. The 2nd sphere governs the cosmos, the spiritual world, the hierarchies below them. These beings interact less directly with God than the 1st sphere, and less directly with humans than the 3rd. They are the middle management of the divine administration. The dominions, also called dominations, they regulate the activities of the angels below them. They receive divine instructions from the 1st sphere and transmit them downward. They are described as carrying scepters and orbs, symbols of authority and governance. Thomas Aquinas wrote that the dominions rarely manifest directly to humans. They work through the orders below them. If the Seraphim are the divine fire and the cherubim are the divine guardians, the dominions are the divine bureaucrats, the beings who ensure the cosmic order runs according to divine intention. This sounds diminishing. It is not. The governance of a cosmos is not a small task. The virtues. The virtues are associated with movement, specifically with the movement of the physical world, the regulation of nature, the cycling of seasons, the behavior of stars and planets. In the developed tradition, miracles, the interruption or transcendence of natural order, are the work of virtues. When the laws of nature are temporarily suspended in response to prayer or divine will, a virtue is the agent through which this happens. They are also associated with grace and courage, the virtue of the Latin name. The virtues strengthen those who face great trials and pour out grace in times of crisis. When athletes and soldiers and the gravely ill report experiences of sudden, unexpected strength, a second wind that came from nowhere, a calm that had no natural explanation, the tradition has a category for this: the powers. The powers are the warriors of the 2nd sphere. Their function, to resist evil in the spiritual dimension, to prevent demonic forces from disrupting the divine order in the cosmos and in human souls. Paul mentions them in Ephesians 6 inches, his famous description of spiritual warfare. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. The word translated powers here, exousiai in Greek, is the same word used for the angelic order. The powers occupy a boundary position. They operate in the same domain as the fallen angels, the demons, the spiritual forces of opposition. They are the beings whose specific function is to hold that boundary. They are described as the guardians of history, the forces that prevent the worst possible outcomes from actualizing. that limit the damage that demonic forces can do to the created order. Catholic tradition holds that at death, the soul passes through the domain of the powers, which is why Paul mentions them alongside death and life in Romans 8, promising that nothing in these categories can separate believers from divine love. The border between life and death is guarded, the third sphere beings who touch the human world. The third sphere is where the angelic world intersects most directly with human experience. These are the beings you can find in Scripture doing specific things to specific people, named beings, identifiable missions, the principalities. The principalities, archai in Greek, are the guardians of nations, of large communities, of the structures of human society. In Daniel 10, one of the most startling passages in the Old Testament, the angel who appears to Daniel explains that he was delayed for 21 days because the prince of Persia opposed him. He only got through because Michael came to help. The prince of Persia is not a human being. It is an angelic being, a principality assigned to the Persian Empire, which is resisting the divine messenger's mission. This passage implies that behind every human nation, every human power structure, there is a corresponding spiritual entity, and that these entities have their own interests, their own allegiances, and their own capacity to resist divine messengers. The geopolitics of the human world has a spiritual shadow. Michael the archangel is identified in Daniel as the principality assigned to Israel. He is not the only one. Every nation has one. What the principalities assigned to nations that actively oppose God's purposes are doing, whether they are fallen angels or something more complex, is a question the tradition has never fully resolved. The archangels. In the hierarchy of Pseudo-Dionysius, the archangels are the second lowest order, not the highest, despite what popular usage implies when we use archangel to mean the most important angels. In practice, the archangels are the beings with the most significant direct interactions with human history recorded in Scripture. They carry the most important divine messages. They fight the most significant battles. The word archangel appears only twice in the entire New Testament, once in 1 Thessalonians and once in Jude, and in both cases it refers specifically to Michael. The Bible names 3 archangels directly. Michael. The name means, "who is like God?" a rhetorical question whose answer is, no one. Michael is the warrior, the defender, the one who fights. In Daniel, he is the prince who fights for Israel against the demonic principalities of opposing nations. In Revelation 12, Michael leads the angelic army against the dragon, Satan, and his angels in the war in heaven. The dragon is defeated, cast down to earth. In Jude 9, Michael disputes with the devil over the body of Moses, and rather than engaging in personal combat with a being of such power, says only, "The Lord rebuke you." Even Michael does not trust his own power against the adversary without invoking a higher authority. In Catholic, Orthodox, and some Protestant traditions, Michael is the angel of death, or more precisely, the one who escorts souls to judgment, the one who carries the scales in some artistic traditions, the one present at the threshold between life and whatever comes after. He is invoked as a protector. His feast day Michaelmas was one of the most important in the medieval calendar. Gabriel. The name means God is my strength, or man of God. Gabriel is the messenger, but not a general messenger, a specific one. Gabriel delivers the most important announcements in Scripture. To Daniel, the interpretation of visions, the prophecy of the 70 weeks, the timeline of the coming Messiah. Gabriel appears to Daniel twice, explicitly identified by name rare in the Old Testament, where angels are almost never named. To Zechariah, the announcement that his elderly wife Elizabeth will conceive a son, John, who will prepare the way of the Lord. Zechariah doubts. Gabriel strikes him mute for 9 months as a consequence. To Mary, the Annunciation. Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you. The most significant moment in Christian theology, the announcement of the Incarnation is delivered by Gabriel. Gabriel stands in the presence of God. This is not a minor functionary. This is the being trusted with the announcement that changes everything. In Islamic tradition, where Gabriel is Jibril, he is the angel through whom the Quran was revealed to Muhammad, the same being, carrying the most significant announcement of that tradition's history. Gabriel keeps the most important messages. Raphael. The name means God heals. Raphael appears explicitly only in the deuterocanonical Book of Tobit, a text accepted as scripture by Catholic and Orthodox Christians, not included in the Protestant canon. In Tobit, Raphael travels in disguise with the young Tobias on a journey, assists him in defeating a demon, facilitates his marriage, helps him obtain a cure for his father's blindness, and then reveals himself. I am Raphael, one of the 7 angels who stand ready and enter before the glory of the Lord. 1 of 7. Raphael's revelation implies there are 7 archangels, of whom only 3 are named in Scripture. The tradition has filled in the other 4 names with varying degrees of consensus. Uriel, Sarakiel, Raguel, and Ramiel appear in 1 Enoch, but this text's canonical status is disputed. Raphael is the healer, the companion on difficult journeys, the one who appears in disguise and is not recognized until the end. The angels. The lowest order, the most numerous, the ones who interact most directly, most frequently, and most intimately with individual human beings. These are the guardian angels, a doctrine not formally defined in any single biblical passage, but built from a series of references. Psalm 91's, "He will command his angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways." Matthew 18's, "See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that their angels in heaven always see the face of my Father in heaven." Acts 12's account of the church praying for Peter in prison. And when Peter is miraculously freed and arrives at the door, those same people saying, "It must be his angel." Every person has an angel. Catholic, Orthodox, and many Protestant traditions hold this. The angel is assigned at birth or at baptism, depending on the tradition. It accompanies the person through life. The guardian angel does not override free will. It does not prevent all harm, but it intercedes, it prompts, it according to the tradition whispers. Every impulse toward good that you cannot fully explain, every moment of sudden clarity, every inexplicable hesitation before a bad decision. The tradition has a category for those. The fall, what happened when angels chose wrong. Every theology of angels must eventually address the question that makes the whole structure more complicated. Some of them fell. Lucifer. The name appears once in the Latin Bible, the Vulgate translation of Isaiah 14:12. Quomodo sesidisti de caelo, Lucifer, fili aurore? How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. In context, this passage is addressed to the king of Babylon. It is a taunt song about a human ruler's pride and fall. The application of this verse to Satan, to a being who fell from heaven before human history began, is not from Isaiah itself. It is from later interpretation, largely formalized by the early church fathers and then by Milton. Luke 10:18 is the key New Testament text. Jesus says, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." This is the direct scriptural basis for the fall narrative. But it gives no backstory, no description of what Satan was before the fall, no account of the rebellion. The backstory: the proud and beautiful archangel who refused to accept God's supremacy and was cast down, comes from 3 main sources. Origen, the 3rd century theologian, argued for a pre-cosmic fall based on interpretations of Ezekiel 2:8, the lament over the king of Tyre, which contains imagery: "You are in Eden. You are on the holy mountain of God," that seemed to exceed a description of a human ruler. 1 Enoch, the ancient Jewish apocalyptic text, describes the fall of the Watcher's angels who descended to earth, took human wives, and produced the Nephilim. and Milton's Paradise Lost, which gave the entire narrative its most vivid and most influential form. What caused the fall? Scripture gives two answers, and they are not identical. Isaiah's application to Lucifer suggests pride. I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. John 8:44 gives a different emphasis. Jesus describing the devil as a murderer from the beginning, and a liar and the father of lies. The primary characteristic is not pride, but deception. The tradition eventually combined these. Pride was the root, and from pride grew the deception that has characterized demonic activity ever since. Thomas Aquinas argued that Lucifer's sin was the desire for his own excellence without reference to God, not the desire to be God exactly, but the desire to be excellent on his own terms, without dependence, without acknowledgement of the source of his excellence. The most gifted being in creation decided his gifts were his own. That decision was the fall. How many fell? Revelation 12:4. The dragon's tail sweeping a third of the stars from heaven is the most frequently cited quantification, a third of the angels, which means if the angelic population is vast as tradition assumes, a number of fallen beings beyond human calculation. These fallen angels, demons, are not destroyed. They continue to exist. They retain their angelic nature, intelligence, power, immateriality, stripped of the divine orientation that made those qualities serve creation. What remains when an intelligent, powerful, spiritual being loses its divine orientation is something the tradition describes as genuinely terrifying. Not a cartoon character with a pitchfork, an intelligence vastly beyond human comprehension, with no moral direction and no constraints except those divinely imposed. Michael versus Lucifer. The tradition that places Michael and Lucifer as the two great opposite poles of the angelic world, the faithful and the fallen, the protector and the adversary, is not directly stated in Scripture, but flows naturally from the assignment of functions. If Michael is the one who asks, who is like God, the one whose entire identity is structured around the acknowledgement of divine supremacy, then the being whose fall consisted in refusing to acknowledge that supremacy is Michael's natural opposite. They are the two answers to the same question. Every angelic being, at some point, face the question that defines them. Is your excellence your own, or is it given? Michael answered, given, always given. Nothing I am is mine. Lucifer answered, mine. And the difference between those two answers is the difference between the first sphere and the abyss. Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, where they disagree. The angelic theology we've described is largely shared across Christian traditions: the hierarchy, the named archangels, the fall, the guardian angels. But there are significant divergences in emphasis and in practice. Catholic tradition, the most developed and most liturgically integrated angelology. Guardian angels have a specific feast day, October 2nd, added to the universal calendar in 1670. The angels are invoked in the Mass, with angels and archangels, and with all the company of heaven. The Requiem Mass invokes Michael to lead the souls of the dead to holy light. Catholic theology has produced the most systematic angelology of any Christian tradition, primarily through Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica, whose question De Angelis, on angels, runs to dozens of extraordinarily precise articles addressing questions like, do angels have location? Can two angels be in the same place? Do angels sleep? How do angels communicate with each other? Aquinas' answers: angels have no fixed location, but occupy a position relationally. Two angels cannot occupy the same space simultaneously. Angels do not sleep because they have no bodies that require rest. Angels communicate through direct illumination of intellect. One angel makes its thought directly present to another without the medium of language or symbol. This is a theology of minds without bodies, and Aquinas' treatment of it remains one of the most rigorous in philosophical history. Orthodox tradition, Orthodox Christianity shares Catholic angelology in most fundamentals, but has a distinctively more mystical register. The theology of the divine light theosis, the transformation of the human person into divine likeness, places angels as fellow participants in a process that is essentially contemplative. Orthodox iconography of angels is notably different from Western art, more formal, more austere, less humanized. The faces are beautiful, but not comforting in the Western sense. They have the beauty of something too serious to be soft. The Orthodox tradition also preserves a stronger connection to the liturgical presence of angels. The divine liturgy is understood as an earthly participation in the heavenly liturgy of the Seraphim. When the choir sings the Trisagion, Holy, 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 they are, in Orthodox theology, joining a song that has been sung continuously since before creation. Protestant tradition, significantly more varied. The Reformation's suspicion of what it considered Catholic additions to Scripture led most Reformed traditions to step back from the full hierarchical angelology. Calvin was skeptical of the detailed hierarchy, arguing that since Scripture does not explicitly enumerate 9 orders, Christians should be cautious about building detailed theology around it. Martin Luther had a warmer relationship with angels. His own experience included what he described as angelic presence during critical moments of his life. Contemporary evangelical Protestantism occupies an interesting position, largely skeptical of formal hierarchy and of any practice that looks like angel veneration, but deeply invested in the reality of spiritual warfare, in the active presence of both angels and demons in the spiritual dimension of everyday life. The charismatic Protestant tradition has perhaps the most intense practical angelology of any contemporary Christian stream, with direct, personal experiences of angelic presence reported with a frequency and specificity that would make most Catholic theologians nervous. The one point of genuine division, Enoch. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world, tracing its origin to the conversion of the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8, includes the Book of Enoch in its biblical canon. The Book of Enoch contains the most detailed angelology in any Jewish or Christian text, the names and functions of dozens of angels, the account of the watcher angels who descended to earth and fell, the 4 great archangels and their specific domains. Western Christianity, both Catholic and Protestant, treats Enoch as non-canonical. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church reads it as Scripture. The consequence: the most developed biblical angelology in the world is contained in a text that most Christians have never read, and most Christian traditions do not include in their Bible. 9 orders, 3 spheres, burning fire at the top, guardian angel at the bottom. Every point on the spectrum between them, occupied by beings that the tradition describes as real, present, and active in the world right now. The Seraphim burning before the throne, the Cherubim guarding the places where the divine is most concentrated, the thrones carrying the weight of divine decisions, the dominions governing the governance, the virtues moving through the physical world, the powers holding the boundary against the forces of opposition, the principalities managing the spiritual dimension of nations and institutions, the archangels carrying the most significant messages, fighting the most significant battles, healing the most significant wounds, the angels, uncountable, each one assigned to a single human life. And underneath all of them, or outside all of them, depending on how you map it, the fallen third, retaining their intelligence, retaining their power, stripped of their orientation. This is the map. Not the greeting card, not the chubby Renaissance baby, not the soft, comforting attendant who shows up in your hospital room to make you feel better. The being that appears in the actual texts arrives with a sound like a great army, with 4 faces and wheels of fire and eyes on every surface, with a burning coal that purifies by contact, with a greeting so overwhelming that the first necessary thing it says is, "Do not be afraid." You will not find that on a greeting card. because whoever put the greeting card together understood, correctly, that most people are not actually ready for what the tradition describes. But the tradition describes it anyway.